Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm honestly so thrilled to have you here today because I have some seriously eye-opening news about our beloved grocery shopping routines. I've been diving into a ton of research these past few weeks, reading up on USDA reports, scrolling through consumer forum comments, chatting with friends across the country, and checking out some financial forecasting websites. I wanted to know precisely which grocery products, if any, were likely to skyrocket in price once we roll into April 2025. Let me tell you, the results were both surprising and kind of frustrating. There's a bunch of different reasons behind these projected price hikes, from unpredictable weather patterns that affect crop yields to global shipping disruptions that seem to pop up at the worst times. But don't worry, by the end of this video or article, you'll know exactly which items to watch out for, so you can either adjust your shopping list in advance, look for deals, or try out more budget-friendly alternatives. So strap yourself in, grab a coffee, a tea, or a snack, which hopefully hasn't gone up too much in price yet. And let's talk about the 10 grocery products that some economic experts are saying will be way too expensive this coming April. Let's get started with our first item, which might sound like a no-brainer, but it's more complicated than you'd expect. Meat, specifically beef. Over the last few years, we've seen fluctuations in the cost of beef because of a few overlapping factors. We've had droughts in certain parts of the country that severely impacted cattle feed production, we've had disruptions in supply chains, and we've also seen higher feed and fertilizer prices in the global market. According to the USDA's Economic Research Service, cattle inventory has been on a decline in the past couple of years due to ranchers scaling back because of environmental stresses like drought. Even though we're currently on a path to recovery, analysts predict beef prices could surge again in early 2025 before stabilizing, making April 2025 a particularly expensive month for your favorite steak or burger. Of course, we might still see sales or discounts, but on average, many economists are saying that beef could be pricier than usual. One rancher in Oklahoma said on a farming forum that he's worried about feed costs eating into his bottom line, making it harder to keep his herd at current levels. And to top it off, a shopper named Carol from Texas chimed in on a Facebook group about how the last time beef prices jumped, she had to switch to more chicken and turkey just to keep her grocery budget intact. If that's not enough of a warning sign, I don't know what is. Number 2. Poultry, chicken and turkey especially. Some industry watchers predict their prices might also climb significantly in April 2025, though perhaps not as drastically as beef. The reason behind this is partly due to feed costs, which also affect poultry, and partly due to supply chain fluctuations whenever there's a disease outbreak or a large jump in energy costs. The National Chicken Council has indicated that whenever feed prices go up, we can usually expect some form of cost passed through to consumers. For anyone who remembers the avian flu outbreaks in past years, you might recall how entire flocks had to be culled, which led to a temporary spike in poultry prices. That risk hasn't completely vanished, especially with more unpredictable weather patterns possibly influencing disease spread. One expert from a Midwestern Poultry Association observed that a combination of unpredictable climate conditions and an increase in feed grains being diverted to biofuel production might keep poultry prices high during the first half of 2025. Some shoppers have been leaving comments on social media saying that rising chicken prices might be the last straw for them, especially if they've already switched away from beef to cut costs. April could be a particularly sensitive month for all these factors to converge right after the tail end of winter, when feed supply might be tight and demand picks up around spring holidays. Number 3. Produce. Since fruits and vegetables don't always get the spotlight they deserve in discussions about grocery price hikes, but they're definitely not immune. Fresh berries, strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, you name it, tend to have a bit of a love-hate relationship with weather conditions, energy prices, and shipping availability. The reason experts are signaling a jump in berry prices come April 2025 is related, in part, to how these delicate fruits rely on near-flawless logistics. If you've ever picked up a carton of strawberries or blueberries in your local supermarket, chances are they traveled quite a distance, possibly from California, or even imported from Mexico or South America. If shipping costs go up due to fuel prices, driver shortages, or cross-border regulation changes, Berries tend to show that increase on the price tag almost immediately. The USDA has said that fruit prices, especially berries, show higher levels of volatility than many other produce categories. And according to a California Strawberry Commission representative interviewed in a trade publication, water restrictions and labor shortages on the West Coast might also keep harvest levels lower than expected, pushing wholesale and retail prices up around April. That lines up with a bunch of comments I read from shoppers in Florida who noticed that every spring there's always a weird spike in the cost of some berries, which can really cramp your style if you're big on healthy eating or love making fruit smoothies at home. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on. Number 4, avocados. People have been calling them green gold for years, partly because they can get pretty pricey even in stable times. Unfortunately, the combination of weather issues, import regulations, and supply-demand imbalance might make avocados quite expensive by April 2025. If you recall, whenever there's a situation in Mexico, where a big chunk of our avocado supply in the United States comes from, with shipping disruptions or labor negotiations, the wholesale prices spike fast. Add to that the trend that avocados have only grown in popularity over the years. There doesn't seem to be a big dip in consumer demand, and the result is that if anything disrupts the supply chain, grocery shoppers will see it reflected immediately. A friend of mine, Jake, who works in a produce section of a major supermarket, said last year that whenever there's talk of a storm damaging avocado groves in Mexico, the local produce managers brace themselves for phone calls from corporate about adjusting displays and signage. The forecast from some market analysts suggests that next spring might be one of those times when supply is tight, especially if demand remains strong in the United States. Whether you're a fan of avocado toast or you like to whip up guacamole for your game nights, you might need to budget a bit more money or find a cheaper alternative for your healthy fats. Number 5, eggs. Now, eggs had quite a dramatic price surge a while back, and they do tend to fluctuate in cost, often because of disease outbreaks in flocks and feed cost issues. By the time April 2025 comes around, some experts are predicting we might see a renewed spike in egg prices, particularly if feed remains costly and if the egg-laying flocks that were reduced due to avian flu in prior years still haven't fully recovered. According to a report from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, egg prices can double during major disease outbreaks, and it sometimes takes months, if not a full year, for production to bounce back. The complication here, as I read in a commentary by a poultry veterinarian working in Iowa, is that these types of viruses can crop up again if conditions are right. Plus, if grain prices keep climbing, that's yet another cost. I saw a post on a frugality forum from Linda in Oregon who said that when egg prices soared before, she cut back her baking and switched to egg substitutes more often, something she never thought she'd do because she loves real eggs for her recipes. But with the possibility of a spike in 2025, Linda said she's already planning to keep an eye out for any good deals and maybe buy in bulk when prices dip, freezing eggs or using powdered egg products to tide her over. It's definitely an interesting strategy for anyone who relies heavily on eggs for breakfast or baking. I couldn't talk about grocery items getting more expensive without mentioning dairy, milk, and cheese in particular. These staples are heavily influenced by feed costs for dairy cows, energy costs for processing and refrigeration, and general supply chain issues. If one part of that chain tightens up, the ripple effect can be big. The USDA has an index called the all milk price, and it's historically shown periods of increase that correspond with feed price hikes. Now, the question is whether April 2025 will see a significant jump. Several agricultural economists I read cited the possibility of higher general inflation combined with ongoing climatic challenges that reduce overall dairy production in major farming regions. Joe, a dairy farmer from Wisconsin, posted in a farming group that while prices have dipped slightly at times in the past year or two, it might not last if feed costs remain high. If that happens, farmers might scale back on herd sizes or reduce certain production inputs, leading to a tighter milk supply come spring 2025. And once you have a tighter supply of milk, you get a higher cost for fluid milk, but also for cheese, butter, and other dairy products. A friend of mine who's a big fan of artisanal cheeses said she's already bracing for possible sticker shock. She loves trying new varieties and noticed that even small changes in the cost of raw milk can push up the final price of a cheese wedge by quite a bit. So, if you love your dairy, keep an eye on those prices next April. Number 7. Coffee. Yes, coffee beans and grounds. This is a big one. Anyone who loves a morning cup of joe might have noticed that coffee prices have been a roller coaster ride in the last few years, in part because coffee production is so heavily impacted by weather conditions in key growing regions like Brazil, Colombia, and parts of Central America. In 2021 and 2022, there were serious concerns about frost in Brazil affecting the coffee trees, and the ripple effect of that was felt for months. If such weather anomalies continue, or if shipping costs remain high, or if labor issues pop up in major ports, we could see another climb in coffee prices in 2025. The International Coffee Organization mentioned in a market report that climate volatility is the biggest wildcard for coffee production. If yields drop or shipping lanes get clogged, guess what happens at your local grocery store or coffee shop? Prices go up. I was chatting with a friend in Seattle, which we all know is a big coffee town, and she said that whenever there's news of a potential shortfall in coffee production, local cafes start prepping their customers for higher prices. By the time we hit April, it might be that global demand is really high again, and any short supply will push prices up. So for coffee lovers who want to keep their budget in check, I'd recommend maybe exploring ways to buy beans in bulk when there's a sale, or even switching to more budget-friendly brands if you absolutely have to. Number 8. Canned goods, especially certain types of canned veggies and soups. Canned products usually hold their price pretty well, but if the cost of raw ingredients and the cost of metal for cans go up, there's usually a corresponding price jump at the checkout counter. Several commodity analysts have pointed out that steel and aluminum prices can fluctuate based on global demand and supply disruptions, and that cost gets passed on to the end consumer. If the produce used in those cans, like tomatoes for tomato soup or peas and corn for those mixed veggie cans, gets hit by poor harvest yields or higher transportation costs, you get a double whammy. Some shoppers on a budget-focused subreddit have commented that they've already noticed certain brands of canned tomatoes creeping up in price. One shopper, whose username is Budget Beans, wrote that they used to buy 10 cans of their favorite tomato sauce for a particular price, but they recently noticed that even discount stores had jacked up the price by a few cents per can, which adds up if you stock your pantry. By April 2025, if forecasts about harvest issues and supply chain snags are on point, we might see more of these incremental increases, making your go-to canned soup or canned veggies more of a luxury than you'd expect. It might not be as dramatic as some fresh items, but it's still something to keep on your radar, especially if you rely on canned goods for easy weeknight meals. Number 9. We can't skip over grains and cereals, particularly wheat-based products like bread and pasta. According to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, global wheat prices can be incredibly sensitive to conflict, extreme weather, and shipping bottlenecks in the major wheat exporting countries. For instance, if a big wheat-growing region has a bad harvest or geopolitical tensions disrupt the flow of exports, prices can shoot up quickly. By the time it trickles down to your local grocery store, you might see that loaf of bread or box of pasta cost more than it did just a month prior. One economist from the University of Illinois was quoted in a local newspaper saying that unpredictable climate patterns, either heavy rains or unexpected heat waves, could severely affect wheat yields in 2024 and early 2025. If that happens, we can expect a spike in April. A good friend of mine who bakes her own bread has been stocking up on flour whenever it's on sale because she remembers how drastically flour prices rose in certain years, and that's not to mention shipping disruptions. If trucking rates go up, or if the rail system sees more congestion, all of that will be reflected in the final price we pay for basic starches. So if you're a bread lover, or if you make a lot of pasta dishes, be aware that it might not be the cheapest staple come April. Number 10. Olive oil. Olive oil production is heavily dependent on the Mediterranean climate, primarily in countries like Spain, Italy, and Greece. In recent years, Europe has seen episodes of extreme weather, heat waves, droughts, and sometimes unexpectedly cold spells that can drastically reduce olive yields. There were reports back in 2022 and 2023 about significant drought in parts of Spain, which led to a noticeable spike in olive oil prices around the globe. If that pattern of weather extremes continues, experts say we could be looking at similarly high or even higher olive oil prices in 2025. The International Olive Council tracks global production, and they've noted that yields can vary a lot from year to year if the olive trees are stressed by harsh conditions. Some folks I spoke with who live in Italy said that their local olive mills had a rough couple of seasons in a row, leading to less oil being produced. By the time that shortage travels through the supply chain, grocery store shelves in the U.S. start reflecting higher price tags. One home cook named Maria commented on a cooking blog that she started mixing different oils, like canola or vegetable oil, with small amounts of olive oil in her dressings and sautéing, because the prices have gotten too high for her to keep using pure extra virgin olive oil as freely as she used to. If the spring 2025 harvest is underwhelming, that's when we could see these prices ramping up even more. Those are the 10 big categories I've uncovered that some experts say might be way too expensive in April 2025. And I know it's kind of a bummer to think about how the cost of everyday items can creep, or sometimes jump, upwards, especially when we're already dealing with so many financial pressures. But knowledge is power. If we know in advance which categories might see a spike, we can plan accordingly, whether that means trying out some meatless recipes to cut down on pricey beef, stocking up on certain pantry items when they go on sale, or exploring local produce options that might circumvent higher shipping costs. There are actually a bunch of ways to soften the blow, and I'm sure some creative folks out there will come up with even more ideas than I can think of right now. One thing I've learned from reading so many expert reports and talking to everyday shoppers is that we have to stay flexible and do our research. If we cling too tightly to certain habits or brand loyalties, we might end up paying more than we need to. In challenging economic times, it might be worth exploring store brands or generics, or even adjusting your meals to reflect what's in season locally. And if you're fortunate enough to have a small backyard or community garden plot, maybe 2025 is the year to experiment with growing a few vegetables or herbs. Plenty of folks have cut grocery bills by growing tomatoes, peppers, or even kale in small spaces, circumventing some of the price hikes we see in stores. Now, none of this is set in stone. Maybe some miracle will happen and supply chains will be in perfect harmony come April 2025. Or the weather will be mild and yield bumper crops in all major agricultural regions. But if we've learned anything from the last few years, it's that volatility is becoming the norm rather than the exception. Having a heads up can make all the difference. You might even end up saving money if you watch for strategic deals or sales leading up to the new prices. And even if you don't end up using everything you stocked up on right away, non-perishable or freezable items can serve as a buffer when prices creep upward again. I really appreciate you tuning in and sticking with me through all this info. It's a lot to digest, I know, and it can feel overwhelming at times. But just remember, there are plenty of ways to be resourceful. Shoppers have shown time and again that they can adapt, whether it's by trying new ingredients, hunting for deals, or sharing tips in online communities. So if you learned something new today, or if you have your own tips to share, maybe you've got a budget-friendly meal plan or know a local farmer's market that offers great deals, definitely let me know in the comments or in the community groups where we chat. This is all about us helping each other navigate the twists and turns of the grocery world. Thanks again for watching or reading. Let's hope these predictions won't be as dire as some experts say, but if they are, at least we'll be prepared. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into grocery pricing, or you want to see more content about saving money and staying one step ahead of market trends, make sure to stay tuned. There's plenty more to talk about in the world of budgeting and shopping strategies, and I can't wait to share more soon. Until next time, take care, stay informed, and happy shopping, hopefully at a reasonable price.